Hi sweeties, how are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim, and thank you all so much for all the love and support you all shower me here. I am grateful and you all are super sweet. So today we'll be talking about a video I came across about a pop-colored man who actually said that he was scrolling through TikTok and found out about Thanksgiving, that he never knew a lot about African American Thanksgiving, and that the school system really did whitewash everything because they taught them nothing. And you all know Thanksgiving was the first celebration mostly African Americans or probably indigenous also had after slavery and all that. And then moving over, there is a will of slaves owner, and this will of slaves owner shows how they treated slaves like property, and that really got me. You know, putting them down from one person to another. You know, when you have slaves and probably you write a will and you transfer your slaves to another. And then this, sincerely speaking, all I can say is pay reparations, cut that check to my people because they deserve their reparations more than any other people. Let's get into this video.
So I just finished watching this video of this woman making food for Thanksgiving, and she was talking about the history of Black Americans and Thanksgiving. And she was talking about how Thanksgiving was one of the first holidays that people who were enslaved were allowed to celebrate. And like many Americans, specifically white Americans who learned about slavery, I'm realizing that my education around the entire topic and history is so skewed and flawed. And the amount of things that I've learned just by following Black creators on TikTok is more than I've ever learned in school. So then I started thinking about the conversations that I had with my parents about slavery when I started learning about it in school. And then it got me thinking, how do Black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children? Is it a conversation that's like you sit down and you lay everything out? Is it like something that you slowly reveal more information about because it's obviously a very traumatic topic? Or for anybody out there, was it something that your parents even talked to you about, or was it something that was like, oh, learned it in school? This is a 100% genuine question, and I just want to learn the differences of how Black families teach about slavery versus white families. Thinking, how do Black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children?
So I'm a millennial, born in the 80s, the late 80s. And the way that I learned about slavery was through conversations with my grandmother, who was actually born on a slave plantation. My grandmother is still alive. She's in her mid-80s. She just retired about 3 years ago from working. She worked on a slave plantation up until she was 16 years old. She was born on a slave plantation. Her father was born on a slave plantation. He was a sharecropper. His family was born on a slave plantation. You can literally go to that same slave plantation in Louisiana right now, and you can see the big house, you can see the slave quarters, you can see all that. You can see the very land that my grandparents, my grandmother and her family all worked on. You can see this. In addition to having these conversations about my grandmother's childhood, back when we were growing up, television networks were not shy about talking about slavery in America. Like Disney used to have specials on it regularly. Like there was this show called Night John. I'm sorry, it was a movie. And that was one aspect. When we went to school, we had plays that talk about the Underground Railroad in complete context. And I remember this song in elementary school that they used to teach us called Follow the Drinking Gourd. We also had shows like Reading Rainbow that allowed us to learn about our history through storytelling. And so because of these shows, we were able to ask questions of our parents and our grandparents. Now, that same experience is very different for children today, and it will be very different for my children because a few years ago, they stopped playing Saturday morning cartoons. Shows are not going there the way that they used to on Disney and Nickelodeon. Like there was like full on shows like you would not believe. Like right now you think book banning is something that is hindering us from learning. The way that writers used to really talk about slavery in a way that a child could digest the concept of slavery at its very basic level was very prevalent when we were growing up in the 90s. But our kids don't have that now. So now they learn through TikTok, they learn through Instagram. If they're lucky, they'll be able to find a show. Like I know that the Proud Family does certain episodes where they'll go there about Black history and Kwanzaa and so many other things, but you got to have a subscription to Disney Plus. I know that PBS still does some documentaries, but I don't know about children's shows. I haven't seen that information on Disney and Nickelodeon and Nick Jr. the way that we used to see it. I'd say when it hit the 2010s, things became very different. You literally have to go digging for this information to get it taught to you at a child level. But back to the conversation of how do we discuss slavery? I have textbooks, I have picture books. When my children are old enough, we'll start having conversations about our family history. I will be able to take them to the plantation that my grandmother, their great grandmother, was born on, and we will have conversations. They can still talk to their great grandmother today, and they can literally learn from her today. They also have great aunts. My great aunts are alive, the ones that are older than my grandmother. If they are able to discuss their experiences, because it is a traumatic experience, they will be able to talk to my children. So, in summation, the way that we learn about slavery in our household is through storytelling. And we will continue to tell those stories.
How do Black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children?
I've seen different answers to this question across TikTok, and I've loved all of them. They've come from different directions, and I think they're fantastic. For me, I was raised in a household where my parents did what they could to shield us from a lot of things. They wanted to keep us safe, I feel, is what they wanted to do. So we didn't discuss slavery a lot and how our ancestors were enslaved. We watched the movie Roots and got some understanding of what that movie was about and the book and everything, but we didn't go into details about how we were brought over here, how we were kidnapped and brought over here, and everything that went into being enslaved. A lot of what I know, most of what I know, has been from learning myself or from other people that have historical knowledge that I've been able to kind of ascertain from that, and then using it as a jumping off point to understand what slavery was then and how it's still perpetuated here today. I think some of it might also be generational. You know, I'm 44 years old, my mom is 72, and I think that maybe it's not generational. I don't know. The more that I think about it, I think that my parents were just trying to keep my brother and I in this mindset that it's going to get better, or it's better than what it was. All that's to say is that, you know, for the question, how do Black parents teach their children about slavery? Black parents aren't a monolith, and Black people aren't a monolith. But my personal experience, like I mentioned, I really didn't learn much about it at home. I came from a place of being taught respectability politics, knowing my place, knowing how to say the right things, do the right things, show up the right way, many ways to do what I believe my parents kept me safe. I'm also thinking, now that I've sparked something in my head, I'm also thinking, I don't know that not having that specific talk, I don't know if it would have shaped me in a different way. I don't know. You know, it's our history. I'm talking completely in draft. It's our history. It absolutely is our history. It's part of who we are. It's part of who we are, and we see it every day today. It speaks to the resilience. With that being part of our history, it speaks to our resilience. It speaks to our strength. It speaks to our tenacity. All of these things which we would have had even if we weren't kidnapped and brought here and dehumanized and treated like less than human. I'm happy for this question, and oh boy, if I did not create myself some own journaling moments. Thanks for going on this ride with me.
How do Black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children?
I love this question because it shows how both diverse and yet unifying the experience of being Black in America is. The first times I learned about race and racism, and by that extension slavery, was from my grandmother. She lived with us. She was my maternal grandmother. My dad was always working. My mom had 3 children under the age of 4. So it was my sister who was 4, my brother was 2, and I was an infant. And so my grandma moved in to help us. She's a second mom to me, and I love her. We call her Mima. When she was cooking or playing with us, she would talk about her childhood, growing up in Delray Beach, Florida. She would talk about how this line, the central line in the town, would be the racial divider, that black people were on one side and white people were on the others. This was as early as I could understand English, and honestly probably even before that, because she would just be around us and talk to us about her lived experience. She would talk about the segregated water fountains, the segregated movie theaters, the segregated schools. And when I was a bit older, like 4 or 5, I would ask her why this happened. She would talk about how this country enslaved black people, that we fought a civil war, and when we couldn't justify enslaving them, we found different ways to subjugate them, one of which being Jim Crow segregation. She would talk about marching, she would talk about protesting, she would talk about striking. This is in addition to my own lived experience. I was born in New York and then grew up in Connecticut, and I saw how I was perceived differently. I watched how my family, how my siblings were racialized and treated differently just because we were black. People asked me in my suburban schools if I was bussed in from the inner city. Someone even called me the N-word in the 4th grade. So I would come home from school and ask about all these questions, and my parents would have to tell me. Mind you, I was tall, so around 5th and 6th grade, we had the talk that you're a big black boy and you will be aged up and racialized by police and other authorities. We'd have to do genealogy projects in school, and people would be like, what country are you from? And I'm like, I don't know. I ended up having to do a lot more work to figure out my own family tree than anyone else. Why was I doing genealogical research in 5th grade? Why was I scouring public records, my grandmother's letters and diaries to construct my family tree? Because enslavement and the Jim Crow South destroyed my family connection. I even wrote an article about this. There is no uniform answer to when or how families talk about enslavement and race and racism. But some common threads seem to be that you talk about race first because of the lived experience of your elders in your family, and then also applying that to what you're seeing in your own daily life, and then the questions that come back. I could talk about this for literally years, but this is just a brief overview. Hope that helps.
How do black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children? Is it a
This is a conversation that we often call the talk. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a very black neighborhood, go to a black church, and attend a mostly black elementary school. Slavery wasn't a topic that we didn't broach or that we didn't talk about. We also didn't feel this weird sense of shame that I know some people in our community feel. The way I was taught is that slavery was something that was done to us, but not something that defines us. I was more so taught that this was the history of white people, not the history of black people. Because I was surrounded by so many black voices, especially early on, there was never a sense of shame put into me about this thing that happened to us. If anything, it shows the initial point of our struggle with this country for our civil rights, our human rights. It shows the endurance and the power and the strength of black people. It is a difficult conversation. It almost feels like you're taking away your kid's innocence in a way. As a new parent, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to have this conversation. Yeah, I hope that helps.
And then it got me thinking, how do black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children?
So my mom homeschooled me. Surprise. Yeah, my mom homeschooled 4 out of her 6 kids. She taught me how to read, how to write, covered my entire curriculum up until the middle of 3rd grade, so 8 years old. So my mom was in charge of teaching me Black history. She had a whole bunch of media. We was watching a lot of media. The Moses movie with Cissy Tyson, Amistad. We had this really cool puzzle. It was like an African-American icons puzzle. We had this book, an African-American folklore for children, children's stories book. Took little family field trips to the African-American History Museum in downtown Los Angeles. That was just a regular part of what we're learning. And my mama didn't have to rely on the public school system because she made her own curriculum. You know what I'm saying? Now my mama, she's got a bachelor's, 2 masters. She's working on her doctorate in education. She knew what she was doing. But what I really want this video to be about is I want to share and explain that learning about Black history as a Black person, as a Black child, is not really fully learning about history. It's like you're learning about your reality. I'm gonna try to explain what that means. Because the type of history we are learning is so close to home and not that long ago, you learn stuff so cavalierly in conversations. Black Panthers, the Civil Rights Movement, even slavery and plantations was not long ago. People who are still living have memories from those times, or they were told memories from those times. So before you know it, you had a family gathering, right? Christmas, Thanksgiving, or just a regular family dinner, and you hearing, oh yeah, you know, Grandpa Mays, well, he was a writer, and he worked with the Black Panthers. You know, I was, went back down to South Carolina when I was 8 years old, had to pick cotton on my family's farm. Cotton? Grandma, you was born in 1940. What you mean he was picking cotton in the 40s? Yeah, because when I was living in D.C., it was segregated. I went to school with Charles Drew's daughters. Charles Drew? Charles Drew. Our parents, our aunties, our great aunts, our grandparents not only learned about these Black American icons, they were working with them. They knew them. They were in the trenches with them. They were living on plantations. They were working on plantations. They were visiting plantations where, our people was enslaved. So it's like you're learning about slavery, you're learning about Black history, but not as if it's in the past. We are like continuing to live Black history. This is on top of you as a Black kid experiencing racism firsthand. So it's not just you're hearing about stuff or you're watching media or reading things or learning about things or hearing stories. You're experiencing things and able to draw parallels between what you've learned and what you've heard from other people, other Black people in your family and around you happening to them and happening to you. I remember like 2 years ago, I asked on this very app to white people, if y'all asked your grandparents if they ever attended any lynchings, or if you asked them about the other side of Black history where y'all people were a part of it, because I was realizing, and we realized, all of these people that are in our lives, that are alive, that are telling us things about Black history that they lived through, survived through, there's another part to that. And it's your white family members. There's information out there about Black history, not just through media, through photos, through writings, through pictures, but by asking people who lived through it, because a lot of these people are still alive or knew somebody who was still alive. And if you want to know the flip side of the history, the perpetrators of it, you got to ask your people that.
How do Black parents have the conversation about slavery with their children?
So this is a really good question. I can say for me personally, we didn't have the talk about slavery or things of that nature. A lot of what I learned from my family is based on stories from my family. My mom will be 73 in January. My father was 72 when he passed away. So having older parents means I have older grandparents and older great-grandparents and so forth, so on and so forth. So I say that to say the stories about those time periods are not too far removed from me. And it's literally about the experiences that my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, so on and so forth had, and the stories that are passed down orally. It's a tradition in the Black community. We tell stories all the time. We pass information that way. That's an African tradition that we have kept. That's just how we, keep our story going. That's how we keep our history alive, by telling our stories. So it's not necessarily information that is shielded from us. It's just about, are you willing to listen to the story of how your great grandmother survived the Reconstruction? Literally, that's it. And also, I would say, in regards to education, we learned a lot about the Black experience in regards to education, because for those of you who don't know, Mary McLeod Bethune is one of my cousins. So we learned about the founding of Bethune-Cookman College, now University. Shout out to BCU. And we learned about the struggle of freed Black people trying to gain an education, having nowhere to go, and these schools being founded within the Reconstruction era, and learning, how they traversed through not being allowed to do certain things and creating their own, and still having white university presidents that wouldn't allow certain things on campuses, and then to see the progression over the years. So a lot of the information that we learned about slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, education, voting rights, a lot of that is not just history. It's experience that we learned from our parents. And it's not necessarily a hard conversation. I think the harder part is when we become older and we have to reconcile the information that we have based on how we live now, and how we realize that it's like wild to imagine, what they went through. But it's not hard to teach to a younger generation. It's literally about, are you willing to listen to this story? Are you willing to hear how your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so on and so forth came to survive? So, hope that helps.
You read about slavery in history books, but reading the wills of slave owners, you see how they really treated their slaves like property, handing them down from one relative to another. Back in the 1800s, that property included slaves. Fulton County Chief Probate Court Judge Kenya Johnson showed me wills her office discovered from back then, where slave owners wrote what should happen to their slaves when the owners died.
It is my will and declare that all my Negro slaves divided into 5 lots. I bequeath to my daughter, Margaret Rebecca, my Negro woman, Jen, of dark complexion, and all of her children, to her and to her heirs forever.
Judge Johnson had her staff go through the wills to see what slave owners did with their slaves when she realized she had documents before the Civil War. Says it's one thing to read about it in history books, another to see and touch the actual records. Staff found one will that caught them by surprise. A slave owner wanted his more than 30 slaves paid and sent back to Africa when he passed.
When they start to Liberia, in the event I die before they start to Liberia, $100 each.
It's fascinating to me that the average Black American cannot tell you where they descend from. But there are whole libraries across this country that have the wills of slave owners. But if we bring up reparations, we look crazy.
TikTok. Tell me y'all seen this. Hold on. Let me pitch myself down for a little guy. Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia. You will never guess what a black judge found in the basement. Tons and tons of wills from the 1800s. And what do you think these wills contain that this beautiful black queen, Judge Kenya Johnson, found? All these white people left their slaves to their ancestors in their wills. She even went on to read one that said, I give my black people and their children to my daughters upon my passing, and to their children, and so on. But not all of these white people were foul. This beautiful black judge, Kenya Johnson, also discovered in one of these white people's wills, he wanted his slaves to be paid $100 apiece before being sent back to their home country in Africa. He didn't want his slaves to continue to be slaves after his passing. He just wanted them to work for him. And yeah, as you can see right here, he wanted his slaves paid before they went home to their home country. And this beautiful black queen, Kenya Johnson, Judge Kenya Johnson, wants these books placed in museums. Why? Because it's U.S. American history, what they are trying to hide from the kids. If you leave it up to these racist people today, they would burn that entire library of hidden wills that contained our people as property to be given to their children, and then their children, and then their children, which didn't work out, as you can see. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments, because this one is crazy. And you can make an appointment to go see these books for yourself.
All I got from the stitches, and trust me, this is really an interesting one. And watching everybody share their own stories through the stitch is just really amazing. But then that, that reminds me that, some people actually lived through this segregation period, or some people were born during that time, or some really did not understand it fully, not until probably some certain things started happening. You can imagine living in a town where, there is a fountain, and there is fountain for black people and fountain for white people. That already would destabilize a child or kind of like, I don't know, but I feel like that alone really sucks. And then having to live separately from white people, like where color people live, you can go there, and they can come to, probably, like, I don't know, but the whole thing is really messed up, and knowing that a lot of people actually went through this and still experiencing it in sort of way is really very mad. Like, it's really very horrible. And I just don't want to imagine, because there was a video that I posted on cimnanya about a woman saying that her parents were raped to the seas, her husband also is, and her in-laws are also the same. I mean, like, how do you all live all, I don't know, but palm-colored people that know that their parents are raped to the seas, I mean, like, then they ended up marrying someone that is also the same thing. I mean, all your families, like everything around you, like they have some kind of behavior. And she was like saying that she did not catch up about what was going on about the races, not until she was in college and all that, or when she finished college. And sincerely speaking, I mean, we can actually end rate this. Why palm-colored women can actually end rate this season if they decide, or if they say, like, if they come together and say, we are going to end this. But because they feel like they are actually not experiencing it, so why would they have to, like, it is not their concern, because they don't experience it. They don't know what it's like and all of that. And they keep saying, I can only sympathize with you because I don't know how, which I understand. I see a lot of people, especially colored people, saying that they really do not know how horrible, I mean, they treated black people, not until they came on TikTok, started learning African American history, and finding out so many evils that their ancestors did to black people. And this one actually found out, I think I came across a video where a woman was talking about Thanksgiving, how Thanksgiving was the first celebration they had after slavery and all that. That was how they found out about this. I mean, some did not know about it. So number one is that schools are already messed up. You all already know that, they don't teach much about history. They try to whitewash it, and now all of a sudden they started saying slavery also benefited people and all that. So all these are something that when we look at it, I feel really bad for my people, because my people really went through all of this. And all you all want to do is look for a way to sideline their struggles, or look for a way to cover up the struggles, instead of letting people know about their struggles, because their struggles are their struggles are part of their history, are the things they went through as individuals or as a group of people. So I don't know how I feel about this, but then really understanding or knowing that a lot of people really went through, like, went through this segregation and all that, really hurts my feelings, because I feel like since then till now, a lot has, I am not saying there has not been changes, but I mean, the changes has not really been much when it comes to my own people, right? It's still like they are running in circle, and they are moving around. And then seeing these wheels of slavery, that one also like hits so hard. Like, I am like, are you for real? Like, human beings now became something something they use for business. I mean, when I am no more, I mean, will my children are getting my slaves and all that. And then you see the reason why they say that they do not actually know where they come from exactly. I mean, the whole thing is just really very sad. Sincerely speaking, very, very sad. This is all I have to say. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.